All right, guys, welcome back to Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here will be doing our three coaches on the hot seat for 2023 as we kick into high gear, as it is almost time for the spring, just a little bit more time to go before we reach that level. But I do not believe there's 5 coaches worthy of being on this list, so we're doing a short episode today, Nick. 3 guys that are potentially entering their final year at their respective school. Neal Brown's going to be the first one. This isn't obvious. This is a guy that saved his job by winning 2 of the final 3, beat Oklahoma by 3 points, and then they survived on the road against Oklahoma State 24-19. And that's what saved his job, because they got blown out by Texas Tech by 38, hung in there with TCU at home, still lost by 10. Iowa State, a double-figure loss. Same with Kansas State at home, 48-31. Neal Brown's really not done much. He had some great success at Troy. The defense took a massive step back this year. Overall, though, 22-25 in 4 seasons. The lone winning season was a shortened 2020 campaign. The lack of quality wins over his tenure, I think, is the highlight, though, Nick. He's not done great. Looking back over the last 4 years at the schedule, I can't find one that's really that high quality. Maybe the 2 wins over Oklahoma teams in November would be the highest quality ones. Those teams weren't exactly great this year. Only 3 players drafted in the past 3 cycles. That is another bulletin point that a lot of people are probably missing, is that the talent is not really getting developed at a high level here at West Virginia right now. And that includes losing 8 starters on defense from 2022. You lost 8 guys, and not a single one got drafted. As expected, the defense took a massive step back, allowed about 33 points per game. And the offense has never really found its true potential, Nick. I thought the running game had some really quality options this year. C.J. Donaldson was a phenomenal outbreak player for them. Overall, was a very deep backfield. Letty Brown in 2021 was great, and they still were one of the worst-ranked rushing attacks in college football. JT Daniels this past year, he's off to Rice now, so that kind of sums up his tenure. And Garrett Green isn't exactly seeing the field probably the way he should, as he was probably the more talented quarterback in this room. Overall, just a lot of negatives from Neal Brown's tenure, Nick. West Virginia, Morgantown used to be a feared place back when Dana Holgorsen was the head coach. That is long gone, though. Those days are behind us. Why is he coming back for a 5th year? Doesn't make sense.
I was personally shocked when Neal Brown was returning for another season. I saw it on ESPN. I saw the little thing on the bottom of the screen reading it. I thought it said Neal Brown was fired, and I was like, yeah, that makes sense. And then I read it closely, and I was like, wait, he's coming back? Kind of shocked me. I really thought he was going to be gone after this season. 22-25 in his tenure. It's just been poor. The play is not good. The records over the last several seasons just not great. 5-7, 6-4, 6-7, 5-7. A loss in the Guaranteed Rate Bowl in 2021. A win in the Liberty Bowl in 2020, but other than that, nothing. The defense continues to regress. They look poor. I thought this defense would take a step back last year, but I thought it'd be, all right. Nope, terrible. Really poor across the season. Offense, it's not hitting the strides, which is really shocking considering Brown is an offensive-minded coach. Has a decent resume in the past. Was previously at Texas Tech as the offensive coordinator, Kentucky offensive coordinator. Those Troy teams were pretty solid when he was coaching them. They put up some points in the Sun Belt. So this has really been a disappointing tenure at West Virginia. I think he's going to lose his job at the end of this season. There's no way they retain him unless they have an incredible season where they win, 8 or 9 games. But I just don't think that's possible for this team. This West Virginia team has no real talent. They're struggling. Fans aren't. Morgantown, like you said, was a feared place, especially back in the Big East days. West Virginia was tough to play there. It was always loud in that stadium, but now it's quiet. The fans are not really that interested, and the production on the field is poor. This team is struggling in the Big 12. They're not producing, and they're going to have to find a new coach who can try to rebuild something and build some sort of competition factor at West Virginia, because right now it just does not exist.
I made a bit of a bold prediction on West Virginia coming into the year. I thought they'd go 4-8. Just by looking at their schedule, and a lot of their fans were kind of unhappy with that. And I was like, yeah, the prediction's made. I think at the end of the year we'll revisit it. And they ended up winning 5 games due to those resilient efforts in conference against the Oklahoma teams. But that was a 4-8 football team, pretty much 43-40 win over Baylor. I think that was probably the highlight of their year. And they put up a great effort against Pittsburgh week 1, which was a phenomenal game, one of the better ones on the season. I do believe you picked Dante Stills in the conference to be player of the year in the Big 12, and he had a pretty good year, and he's probably going to end up drafting, kind of break that streak after having no one drafted this past year. We'll see what happens to West Virginia, though. Neal Brown's going to need 8 or 9 wins, I think, to save his job. Anything less should be his, the end of his tenure. Next up, Justin Wilcox, kind of an underrated name here, and I think this is an important name. This is a guy who went 30-36 in his 6 years here at California. 2 winning seasons, though. That's certainly not ideal. This offense, Nick, has been horrendous. 22.1 points per game the last 5 years. Jared Goff obviously was great in 2016, and then the next year after is when Wilcox took over. The offense was not terrible, about 28 points per game in 2017. Since then, it's been a completely abysmal unit. Jack Plummer transferred over And I thought this offense, I made a prediction, I thought they would score over 30 points per game for the first time since Jared Goff, and they went from 23.8 to 23.9. They did not really get better at all. It was the exact same thing. Plummer did produce 3,000 passing yards. I thought, he kind of did his job. Jaden Knott, I was very excited for how he would perform as a true freshman, because he was a high-end four-star. And, when a team like Cal gets players like that into their system, they got to utilize them. He had 900 yards, 8 touchdowns on the ground. But this is just a complete disaster for California, because the defenses, they've been overall pretty good, but the years where they have to, recycle their talent, where they lose guys and they have to fill in those gaps, those are the years the defense struggles, which is certainly expected, so no blame there. But the offense not did their job, which causes these losing seasons. 4th or better in total defense in the conference from 2018 to 2021. So consistently, for the most part, this has been a great unit for Justin Wilcox. My thoughts, though, is he's going to resign if he doesn't get fired at the end of 2023. I'm not really sure how he will save his job. I think right now in Berkeley, they're just kind of looking for consistency, and I think for the most part, they've kind of gotten that. Cal's never been completely terrible, and they've never been exactly great. Every year, they seem to compete with teams. They were banging on the door of knocking off UCLA at the end of the year. They beat Stanford, which was a bad Stanford team, but they hung in there with Oregon, USC, Washington. For the most part this year, they were really good on the road against Notre Dame. They lost by a touchdown. So, that's not bad. The record doesn't look great on paper, Nick, but overall, I think it was a pretty sound season from Cal, and that's why they brought him back. But I think the reason why I think he might resign is because his services as a high-end Power 5 coordinator, they're going to be coveted. This is a guy that's a Eugene native, a former Oregon Duck. I think going and joining Dan Lanning for a little bit of a pay cut. I think he made $3.6 million this past season. I think he's been making that throughout his tenure here at California. Why not, even though the ceiling's not been fully met, I think, at Cal, the offense certainly doesn't seem like it's going to, progress. Why not resign and go be a high-end Power 5 coordinator, especially in the city you're from? Is that an option that you're feeling? Because I think that, he's still young at 46 years old. Why not leave, go become a Power 5 defensive coordinator where you've had great success in the past at high-end schools and potentially trying to find a gig elsewhere down the line?
I totally agree. I think Wilcox would make more sense as a coordinator than he does as a head.
This Cal team in the past left a bad.
In 2018, 2019, they made bowl games. And they won the Red Box Bowl in 2019, so they finished 8-5. Not a terrible record, but the past 3 seasons, the offense is just stagnant. There seems to be no production with the offense at all. 1-3 in 2020, the COVID year, 5-7 last year, 4-8 this past season. Just not good enough at all. Wilcox is a big defensive coach, which is certainly true, right? He has led this team to a big cut down in defensive points given up. Defensive efficiency is certainly there, solid top to bottom in that regard. And he did sign an extension keeping him at Cal until 2027 following the COVID year. So he does have a few more years on his contract, getting paid $3.06 million a year, which is not a bad annual salary considering he's coach at Cal and that's a state school and stuff like that. I agree with you. I think he'll find a way out of this contract and go try to become a defensive coordinator. Probably at Oregon, that makes the most sense. But somewhere else in the Pac-12 could certainly be an option as well. USC could potentially be looking for a coordinator again as well on the defensive side of the ball. I think, Cal's a tough place to coach because I think that there is never going to be enough emphasis on producing on the football field in Cal. The admissions certainly adds a problem to that. I think that they're just more focused on other things at Berkeley at this point. I think athletics are really not their biggest issue. So the football teams are going to continue to struggle. There really isn't a whole lot of fan support out in Berkeley. Because like I said, they're really more focused on something on the educational side of things. I think Wilcox has done his best with what he's been given. 2 bowl appearances, a bowl win, finishing second in the Pac-12 North at one point. Not terrible. Overall 30-36. The defense has gotten a whole lot better. Just the offense is struggling. They really can't seem to find the pieces. I think Wilcox will be gone at the end of the season, but then again, he does have that contract until 2027, so I think he has the most leash out of the 3 candidates on this list.
Those are some great points you make. They're not really focused on football, and that's exactly why he's kept this job for so long, despite some lackluster results. And even though he did come up short in a numerous amount of games against quality opponents this year, there you go. I think Cal would have no problems letting him finish out his contract if he wins another 5 or 6 games. So we'll see what happens with California. Look at the last guy on this list, Jeff Hafley, 15-20 record in 3 seasons. This is a guy that spent 2012 to 2018 in the NFL as a defensive back coach, went to Ohio State in 2019, was their co-defensive coordinator there, and also helped with the DBs. Very solid COVID year, 6-5, 6-6 the next year. There was high expectations for that team. They really could have competed. I made a prediction going into that year that the Boston College secondary would be one of the best in college football, and they were. They were 3rd best against the pass in 2021. I felt that because of who they had coming back, along with his, background as a defensive back coach, and they certainly delivered. But the defense regressed. They're 13th in the ACC, allowing over 30 points per game this past year. That 2021 season, the Phil Jerkovich injury, just completely derailed this football team. They had a great offensive line. Zay Flowers is obviously great. The defense that year was expected to perform, and they certainly did. Gave up 22 points per game. But they just struggled immensely because Jerkovich went down. Dennis Grissel was awful at quarterback. They could not live being one-dimensional either. And that's just unfortunate for Hafley because that really could have really made his coaching tenure. He really could have, emerged in the conference. So that was unfortunate what happened there. They had a run during the year where they had 14 points or less in 4 straight games in October. I mean, just the worst month I've seen of offensive football in 2021. And it got even worse in 2022, Nick. You had 4 starters departing on the offensive line. The lone returning was Christian Mahogany at guard, who got hurt. I think it was a torn ACL. So you're looking at a completely defeated offensive line. And Jerkovich, he came back, was not all that great. This was just a tough situation for everybody involved. The running game was one of the worst I've ever seen. 63 yards per game, 759 on the year. That's just horrendous stuff. I don't know what to say about Jeff Hafley because this certainly could have went a lot different for him. Again, at that 2021 season was not altered by Phil Jerkovich's injury. I feel like we're having a different conversation.
Jeff Hafley was interesting to hire.
Recruiter,
More, you spent a lot of time in the NFL and had that one season as defensive coordinator at Ohio State. I think it's a big jump to, head coach at Boston College. I think he was a little too soon for the jump. He is a fantastic recruiter, though, which I think is certainly helping his case. He does put together some solid recruiting classes. The records, not been great. The most wins they've gotten 6. They've been above 500, 6-6, 6-5. They haven't even played in a bowl game yet because they withdrew from bowl contention in 2020, and then the Military Bowl in 2021 was canceled. Again, this is another school where expectations, certainly are lower. This is a school that does not compete in the ACC. Another school that is a bigger emphasis on academics. If I'm not mistaken, this is a private college, so that certainly does play a role in it as well. It's not a public university. So I think that does play a role in that. So I think Hafley, I think he has a little bit more of a leash because his team's defense, it was good, then it regressed, right? So it's certainly gotten worse, but I think he needs to continue to try and get his recruiting classes in, develop. He's found some great talent. Zay Flowers was a great talent find. Jerkovich was a fantastic talent find as well. The offensive line talent seems to be producing. I just think the expectations, the combination of the expectations and the recruiting keeps Hafley in this job for a little bit longer. I think of the 3 we talked about today, I think Neal Brown's the only one that really does get fired at the end of the season next year. I think Hafley will put together, probably 6 wins is really what this team's going to get next year. I haven't looked fully at the schedule, but I can't imagine that they're going to win more than 6 games. But that is probably what Boston College is okay with at this point, right? If they can just somehow scrape bowl eligibility, I think that's what they want to see out of their head coach, what they want to see out of this team. Considering this is a team that has not competed really at all since they joined the ACC. The last time they really were a competitive team was in the Matt Ryan era in the Big East. And the schedule, the out-of-conference schedule is not hard, right? They got NIU, Holy Cross, Army, UConn. Those are all winnable games potentially. And then you get to conference play, and you got to find 2-3 more wins in conference play. Hosting Virginia Tech, that's potentially a win. Hosting Virginia, that could be another win. At Georgia Tech could be another win. So I think Hafley will keep his job for another year just because I think there's barely enough talent to get this team above 500. And at that point, that's probably what they're expecting in Boston College.
On the flip side, though, compared to Justin Wilcox, who competed with some heavyweights in the conference, Boston College did not. Lost by 30 to Florida State, 28 to Clemson. They lost even by 10 to UConn, 44-0 loss over at Notre Dame and South Bend. And they also beat NC State by a single point, despite having -1 rushing yard. A team that was down to its 3rd or 4th string quarterback, I believe. So, disaster of a year. They're going to look to put it behind them. But like you said, if he can hit that 6-win mark, he's going to be back for another season. So we'll see what happens. I think that's a pretty good list of 3 guys that will be battling for their jobs this year. And I think Justin Wilcox, if he ends up leaving eventually to become a defensive coordinator somewhere, I'd be very excited to see where that happens. So that's going to be it for today's episode. As always, Nick, I appreciate you joining me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me on. And it's an interesting discussion looking at these coaches. Some of these coaches, they aren't fighting for their lives here. They got to put something together, or else they're going to be looking for a new job.
That's going to be it. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.